Yeah, it was a mass, and it was also so much trial and error that by the point that I probably got to, if I had a bit of a flare up, I'd kind of be like, okay, now I know that these certain things will help it calm down a little bit. I can speak to any of the physios there about it. In particular, one of them called Ali James at Wasp, speak to him. And we ended up going to see specialists and whatnot. But yeah, there was plenty of things that were so frustrating about it because I don't know how much you or some of the listeners will know about Achilles tendinopathy, but you can put it on a scan and your Achilles can look pretty much the same as anybody else. So you can't really judge how sore someone's Achilles is, which makes it even more difficult because you can see an Achilles and be like, yeah, that looks fine. Like you're okay to play, but it might not feel like that.
Well,
So yeah, exactly. Hate to know. I'd love to know how many scans I actually had on my Achilles overall, with ultrasounds and the rest of it. 80% of them came back looking like, yeah, you've got tendinopathy in it, but it doesn't look like it's not hanging on by a thread or anything like that. Where you have a hamstring, you pull a hamstring, it's binary, yes or no. It's a tear or it's not a tear. It's a pull or it's not a pull. This was more complicated, which also added to the frustration.
yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that because the hidden nature of injury, it sounds so crazy to even describe, but genuinely is actually one of the hardest parts of all of it. Is that with some things it's very black and white. Now, I broke my leg when I was younger, in a cast, fixed, done, got better,
Yeah.
happy days. And even things when I've dislocated my shoulder before, had surgery, done, yeah, a bit of bumps on the way, but better. And it's only been since we talked, we chatted a bit off air, but I've got a Lisfranc fracture at the moment, but I've actually also got, been suffering this pretty chronic nerve pain on my other foot as a consequence of the offloading of weight for such a long time. But that's the bit that's getting me the most, was because you can have a scan on it and they go, oh, we
Mm.
can't really see much. Now, very, very specific scans can pick things up, and I'm grateful I've had them, but broadly speaking, when you have that scan, that you get the message back, oh, well, it looks okay.
Hmm.
When you've been in pain for so long and it's exhausting, it's really hard to deal with because you're like, well, hang on a minute, I feel like my pain's being dismissed, but I know they're not doing it deliberately. But the scans are going. And I know I've had times when I've kind of questioned my own. So, well, hang on, am I making a bigger deal of this than it is? And I was kind of really interested to hear kind of your experiences with that.
No, exactly the same thing in terms of you almost kind of second guess yourself to be like, am I just soft or what's going on here? Um, and then to add to what you're saying as well is it's not just the scans that might not necessarily show exactly how you're feeling or how sore the injury is, sure, should I say? But it's also the kind of position that I am and the athlete that I am. For example, I can't remember who it was at Wasp. Someone else had some pretty bad tendinopathy as well, but he was a prop and no, it was a second row.
Sorry, I
Sorry,
shouldn't
and
laugh.
he
I
was.
shouldn't laugh. That's not fair of me to laugh
Yeah,
at
no,
the. I can understand. I kind of get where you go with this in terms of the. Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah. Go on.
well, the thing that was good about it was he actually said it to me. It was second row, and he kind of said, "Look, mine's really sore, but I can kind of get past doing what I'm selected for because I'm just here to whack things, and I can still do that. Like it's still pretty sore, but I'm not relying on my athleticism. Where it's just like for me, if I'm not if I'm not fast or my footwork's slowly down, my rugby ability drops by. I'd always say that I was kind of fit. You have some wingers who are almost all athletes and not the best rugby players. I would say I was probably like a 50-50, or if anything 60-40 towards my sort of athleticism. So played a massive part in me as a rugby player. So I'd have to try and get my body to being in a decent place to be able to perform how I wanted to. So that was difficult as well as some of the things in scans and the rest of it. And then even more difficult. There's other times I'd wake up the next day or in a week's time, and I'm like, I actually feel pretty good to go. So it could just be a case of I remember doing rehab, um, and everything was going really well, and I did one thing that was slightly different, and my Achilles just flared up for the
Yeah.
next 2-3 months or rest of the season. Just one slight thing that I did different, and that's frustrating as well.
No, I mean, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think you mentioned about the environment, and you kind of mentioned there about kind of how that relates to injury. I'm really interested to hear, was the fact that, or was there anything to do with the fact that when you were able to, went from slowing down to then doing lows, to then suddenly finding that balance, how did that impact you kind of within that environment? Because obviously rugby is a very, and quite rightly, incredibly difficult sport. It's tough. You have to have a certain level of toughness, and you quite rightly mentioned earlier, no one plays at 100%, but they can perform at 100%, and there's a very key difference there. Was that maybe was there a contributing factor to what, like, how you manage the environment as to how that helps you then manage the injury?